here.
Just think about how many Zoom experts we are creating.
Right.
Yes. I
We'll
wish
have
I
them-
bought some stock
Well, and it's
Zoom.
interesting.
a while ago.
It's interesting because running a Zoom meeting and a Zoom webinar aren't the same.
Ah,
So anyway, so it's when you're going back and forth, but I imagine that I'll be a lot better in a week or in a couple weeks. So, okay, Larry, I'm ready to go.
Sure. Let me call the Executive Board Directors Special Meeting of Friday, April 17th to order. And in accordance with Governor Newsom's Executive Order number 2920, this meeting will be a teleconference meeting without a physical location. And public may give comment and we allow testimony. So with that, Andy, can you do a roll call?
Sure. Is the president here present?
Yes.
The first vice president, Mariko.
Here.
The second vice president, Chappie.
Here.
Is the secretary treasurer present? Not yet. She just messaged and said she'll be here soon. Is the legislative action chair present?
Sure.
Okay, and then is the past president present?
here.
Manny Capello. Okay, and then Andy Jordan is here.
Also, Rania is here as well, but I see her picture, but it's showing up as my name. So
Oh, how funny. Okay. And then I see Chris Clark, Liz Gibbons, Jeannie Bruns, and I see Kent Steffens is here. All right. I think I got everybody.
all
Good.
right.
Wonderful.
Very good. So the first thing on our agenda is discussion of the ABAG Executive Board meeting agenda for April 23rd and whether the Executive Board would like to provide feedback on the agendized topics, determine direction, and if any, from our Executive Board. So this has been, let's say, an ongoing issue over the last week or two, and we're seeing more and more things moving forward from an ABAG and MTC standpoint. Andy, do you want to chime in as far as where we stand and kind of what we've discovered in the last week as a quick summary?
I think that I'm going to turn it over to our ABAG members, but what we received was, or we saw their agenda contains some items that there has been a lot of pause for concern about whether they should be taking this up right now while everyone is sheltering in place. And so I think really I'm going to let, hi, Margaret.
Hey, Andy.
So I think we really should just let the ABAG members let us, if Liz and Chris, and then Jeannie is here for MTC, if she could let us know as well. But it appears that there are some governance that they're moving forward on the governance of MTC and ABAG, combining them, bylaws changes, and whether those should happen at this point, I think is the question.
That sounds good. Liz, do you want to go first?
Sure. And Chris has had some conversations with Therese at MTC as well. And he has more specific information directly from her. I'll raise my questions and go. So basically, as you all know, MTC ABAG has a whole lot of work with the 2050 plan and the RENA numbers. And it was agreed that we would, instead of having meetings every other month, have meetings every month. And then because of the emergency situation, we've lost several months of meetings. We lost the whole month of March meetings, and they've been trying to make up with that with staff working at home. And there are a couple of major decisions that the ABAG board is being asked to vote on. It was going to be Thursday last night, but fortunately with only 24 hours of notice they were agreed to postpone it till next week. The concerns from my point of view are conversations with other exec board members, plus some conversations that were held at the governance meeting on the 10th. And I don't know, Jeannie, if you were there. There is a real effort on the part of MTC ABEG staff to push things through. And so the reason I raised the first question is just to make you aware that ABEG is pushing to get everything done, which includes the blueprint, what do you call it? Criteria for the blueprint, getting ready to go forward with the, I'm trying to work too fast here, to the EIR, also moving forward with the bill related to the bond measure to go on related to 1487, and then also some governance consolidation. And the time is very, very tight. And what do we want to do about that? Chris, I don't know if you wanted to filter in and say, you know, what you thought was okay, and I'll filter in with what my concerns are.
Sure. So I had a chance to, so when I, first of all, the packet didn't come out until 24 hours before. So I called Therese, who's the executive director of ABAG and MTC, and sort of share concerns about that, because it was quite a, even though a lot of the things had been discussed previously, it was a substantial amount of items for a single meeting with that little notice to review everything. I think from my perspective, a lot of these things were sort of moving along before. So just, I guess, like 3 things that I would highlight would be, you know, from my perspective, you know, the Plan Bay Area 2050, until we get some indication from the state and feds that we, that they're going to either delay things or provide waivers for the planning. From my perspective, I don't think that we as an organization can just sort of press pause until we have some indication of what the timelines from those agencies are. And so that with Plan Bay Area 2050, we're sort of in the, we're not really making any decisions at this point. They're running the models and doing the analyses. And I think some of the big discussions and decision points for the cities will be around the June timeframe, when those models and analyses come out and we have some more data around COVID-19 sort of impacts on, or what we think the impacts will be on the economy and the job market. So I don't really have an issue with, that's more of an informational item. I think the, I think AB 1487, that's a change of the work plan, but I think what we're all really waiting on there is they're doing polling right now. And I think the polling that comes out in mid-May will probably sort of strongly dictate whether there's still any interest in that or not, and will impact the conversation. So I think that's probably a month away from being a big discussion item. And I don't think the work plan that they're putting together for between now and then is too substantial. I think from my perspective, the really important item, and Jeannie might have more information on this than I do, is we had at either the last meeting or the meeting before decided that we really didn't think it was necessary to pursue you know, significant merger logistics at this time in terms of the 2 bodies, and talking about combined boards or anything like that. But I think we did agree that you know, we could look for areas where there might be some overlaps in specific committees and other things. And it looks like what came out of that is a recommendation to have a joint governance committee, which I don't necessarily have an issue with at a high level, but I think it is extremely important that whether it's this committee or any of the others that we sort of combine forces on, that we ensure we have a proper makeup of those committees, and the cities are well represented on those, and that everything is balanced, and ABAG doesn't lose any of its influence and the cities don't lose any of its influence. So that for me is the most significant item. And I didn't get a sense from the staff report of at what point we would decide what that makeup is. And I think that would be a really important discussion point for everyone to pay attention to. Anyway, those are my high level thoughts on the agenda. And that last item is the one that I'm most concerned about just ensuring that we have input on. But Jeannie may have more information than I am. I wasn't at the governance committee meeting, so I'm sort of reading this from a staff report perspective, but I don't have the context of the actual meeting.
Jeannie, do you have a comment?
You're muted.
Jeannie? There you
Okay,
go.
sorry about that. So in terms of, let me start with the governance one first. So just to understand that what, from MTC perspective, and I believe there is concurrence from the president of ABAG, and we're not pursuing an actual merger of the boards, okay? But what we did come out, and this stems back to the retreat, but what we are doing is the governance committee has said it's worth having the conversation in the different bodies in terms of, do we want to look at any efficiencies elsewhere? So the committees are the area that's that they want to discuss. So staff has no position on this, but they don't want to invest time unless the bodies have a discussion and say, yes, we want to look at it. And let me give you an example. If you look at the legislative, committee, and you look at how we can get more efficiency and what does it do in terms of equitable, you've got 3 board of serve on MTC's legislation committee, and they also happen to serve on ABAG's legislation committee, okay? And no, they don't get double votes, but if you were to merge something like that from a staff perspective, they would sit there and say, well, here's an opportunity to add in cities, So if you've got this many bodies, instead of adding 3 more county board of supervisors, that would be an opportunity to add 3 city representation and looking at distributing that in terms of small and large type of cities. So again, there is no proposal on the table other than to ask, do you even, does ABAG want to even explore that option? Okay. In terms of the schedule for AB 1487, they're going to be looking at, I think the last polling they will be doing will be in the month of May, and that is going to be able to inform their decision about whether or not there is any demonstration that a measure could succeed. It is highly unlikely because it's still suffering from, not having a real set of what exactly are we talking about here. So in terms of that, but that decision is not going to be made yet. We want to look at this next round of polling. But the thing that may be moving forward is there is still the advocacy group is asking that we still, independent of whether or not they move forward with a ballot measure, that they do look at standing up, what is it called, BAFA, whatever the organizational structure is, to stand that up. And the reason they want to stand that up is if there are monies coming down, dollars from state or feds, and we need to respond to how we would do an allocation and all, the best time to be thinking about that is in advance, not to suddenly, maybe be gifted money and then not know exactly how to do with it and trying to react to it. So they are pushing, and so there will be some discussion at some point here in terms of whether or not it makes sense to move forward with standing up that entity. In terms of the Plan Bay Area, a couple of things. There's been a lot of concern over with COVID, what does that mean? Do we put this whole thing on hold, et cetera? So first, in terms of putting it on hold, MTC ABAG has no power to do that, okay? However, they would, if you guys want to look at whether or not you want to take a position on something, they are telling everybody, if you're wanting to ask ABAG to an MTC to lobby with the state to put in a proposal to the state to look at whether or not this is something that should be deferred, add a little bit more time to. They're more than willing to entertain any letters that come from cities associations who are thinking along those lines. And they would be happy to do that. Now, it's not going to be a couple of year delay. It would probably be, months delay. But if we wanted to take a position, if you guys want to take a position, that would be one of the things that they would welcome if you want to send a letter on. In terms of the whole, the regional growth forecast, et cetera, there's been a lot of concern over, remember, this is a 30-year plan, and whether or not we should hold it up. And I think from a MTC ABAG staff perspective, again, a couple of months delay, it all makes sense, but they want to make sure that we all understand that for the back 20 years, okay, the model already has these massive swings factored into it in terms of economic, movement, et cetera. And so the part that really needs to be rethought, and where staff is spending will be spending a lot of their time, is what does this mean with what we're going through for the first 5, maybe 10 years of the plan. Okay, and so that's where the plan may need to be rethought in light of what's happening now. I think that's it.
So
Okay.
if I may, I have a couple of different perspectives. So I agree that the delay has to be a request of the legislature, and cities can write letters, and the city association can, if it wishes to do that. I'm not optimistic that that would accomplish much, to be honest with you. But I think what one can do is request that update for the 2050 plan doesn't wait 4 years, that it might come back sooner, might come back in 2 years. The second point on that is that the return that the criteria and information incorporated into the forecast projections, not the blueprint plans yet, but the forecast projections are missing a lot of criteria. And at the February ABAG meeting, a lot of criteria was, and there doesn't seem to have been any incorporation or addressing of those issues. And I think it might be appropriate to support that.
What additional criteria came out?
It's things like the equity and balance and preventing just gentrification. The comments were made that the criteria was, I'm going to say, too broad. It's in the discussion, the material, it's based on jobs and job growth, and job growth triggers the population growth. And they just felt that that connectivity was not sensitive to the implication of what basing this whole plan on job growth was about. There were comments made by Oakland and Nevada and San Francisco and American Canyon, among other cities, that all were questioning about the criteria. Second comment we had is, and it sort of precedes this, there was some concern that ABAG is proceeding and they're asking for permission to move forward on these things. I just wanted to know if anyone had any thoughts or objections to ABAG going forward in this time, because when you look at all of these issues, there's a commitment by ABAG to go to all the cities and make presentations and explain what's going on with 2050 and 1487. And they're no longer going to be able to do that. And they're going to try and do it with emails and presentations. So our People's Council is going to be able to absorb the information and make decisions. On the 1487 one, as I read it, and I've sent questions in to get answers, there's a bond measure being proposed, and there's no description of what the bond measure means, how it would be, who would pay for it, how it would be paid for. There's just no detail at all to what the bond measure would be. And given that it has to be all resolved by mid of June, it seems a big challenge to do that. And also the cities and counties are supposed to pay for putting it on their ballots. And what actions do cities have to take to do that? None of that is addressed in the short time frame. So there's that kind of thing going. And I think also there's a new budget, and the budget hasn't been adjusted to the current situation for next year. And they have made no indication that they're really revising it. So I think that's being pushed to make that decision. And then the governance consolidation. I think Chris and correct. The thing is that when we had the conversation in February, it was agreed to start discussions. And I may be misreading it, but the way I read the report is they're actually recommending a consolidation of the committees. And ABAG is left with only an administrative committee, and then there's a joint committee. Chris is 100% correct. It's the makeup on the committees that matters. So it's just all of these things are coming up, and trying to make it short here. I didn't want to move forward with in support or opposition. I have serious questions about each of these, and just wanted to make sure that the Cities Association understood what was coming up. And if anybody had anything specifically to say, we'd put that into our thinking, Chris and I.
Okay, I have a few questions. So as far as the bylaw change, so I understand that they need to approve a budget. You know, definitely we all have to approve our budgets by July 1st. But what was a question was a quorum change related to that? Was there a reasoning behind that?
Sorry, the budget is approved by ABAG Executive Board, and then it goes to the, I forget, conference. What's the right word for that, Chris? The big meeting of all of them. And that's done in typically in May. They haven't reset the date. So their schedule is a little ahead of the cities. They're looking for a formal approval at this next meeting.
Which
Yeah,
would
so
be-
basically,
yeah,
it
go
went
ahead.
to, the overall budget went to, so it goes to the finance committee first, then it comes to the executive board, and then that whole plan has to be approved by the General Assembly, the full makeup of all the cities.
Right. But was
The-
there a
the
reasoning?
quorum-
Was there a reasoning behind the quorum change?
Yeah, I think the quorum change was, I think it was requested by the president because they were struggling, at least in some of the Zoom calls, we were right at a quorum.
Okay.
And so I think they were just asking for the authority to change that. That's my basic understanding of it, was some of the Zoom meetings.
But that's only for the committees. That
Right.
bylaw change is only for the committees.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Because the executive board has been able to meet and successfully get quorums so
Right.
far. I think it's some of the committees that have struggled.
I see. But I would think it would be easier under Newsom's current law for Brown Act and people's, conferencing in, unless there's technical difficulties.
So any thoughts on 1487?
So yeah, Margaret, you have a comment? Go ahead.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, I was a little late. So you may have covered this with 1487. Are they looking at putting that when are they looking at putting that on the ballot?
It needs to be resolved and approved by July to go on the November ballot.
And you mentioned that all the cities would have to vote to put it on their respective cities.
It's unclear. That was my last understanding. And the concern is also who's going to pay for putting it on the ballot. Is it going to be the county or the cities contributing or ABAG? It's my understanding that it's the county.
I guess my concern there is time. We're into end of April, mid-April now, and for our council, we go into summer break at the end of June, and so I just don't think there's enough detail at this point, and that can be put together in 2 months or less, and then having all the councils, if we had to put it on the ballot. I just think it's going to be a logistical stretch to do it.
You want to address that, Jeannie, with the polling and everything?
So it is not done at a city by city to put it on the ballot, okay? These things are done through typically at the county level. And so, yeah, Margaret, you kind of missed this. So they're
That's fine, but I
still-
still think you're gonna have to have all the cities, or
Oh.
at least the majority of cities, you know, supporting this, and that's gonna take some conversation. And I just don't think you have, in 2 months, you're gonna be able to get all that, so.
You know what,
that
I
would be
think,
my concern.
Margaret, I think you're absolutely right. The thing is, until they get the strong indicators, they still need to stay on a course moving forward. They're
Mhm.
doing, again, another set of polling. If the polling falls off, okay,
Well,
that
yeah, in light of what we're going
that's
through,
going to kill it. But
we're
the
not
other
gonna
thing
see-
is, you know, you're talking about at minimum a $5 million to $8 million campaign, even if it polls well. And there is right now, that's the other thing. There's not a clear indication, you know, what the situation is, because that's typically comes out of major corporations to do all of that. So, you know, I think my humble opinion, one person's opinion, the chances of something going out onto the ballot in November, I think are slim to nil right now, but they need to have the discussions. They need to look at, which is why I said, I really think that the discussion is probably going to end up moving very quickly to standing up the organization should money come in from other sources, so that we have a way to distribute money. Versus
They are, Susie, sorry to interrupt Jeannie, but they are proposing a committee to be that committee. And it's no electeds on it. It's all, correctly, it's all nonprofit organizations with no accountability.
yeah, that's, and yeah.
And the other thought I have is, you know, I remember the last Great Recession, and I think we're just going to be in a very different situation. And housing isn't going to be necessarily the top priority, but, you know, economic development and job creation. So I just don't know if, you know, folks are really going to want to support money, you know, in that way. And but I do support the idea of having some kind of body, and I would like to see that body talk about how we try to encourage the developer world to continue building during this time, because I think, you know, we've done the planning, at least Mountain View, other cities, we've zoned for the units to be built, but the last Great Recession was when all development stopped, and that's when we lost ground in keeping up the supply with demand. And I just think that's going to happen again. And so that's really where we should be focusing, is how do we keep the builders, the developers going and building the housing that, you know, we've already approved. Thanks.
I think that's all extremely relevant. The thing is, we're being asked to make so many critical decisions now without a lot of information. I have no problem representing the group if you would like me to make comments and concerns known, recognizing that there's a lot of information that we just don't know, and it doesn't bode well for the future. I agree, we don't want to say no right now, but we need to make sure. I do have real problems with the proposal for the board makeup, of having just nonprofit housing groups and no electeds. It has no accountability. And I think that whole makeup needs serious discussion.
And I'll agree with that. I'll just add a few comments. But the concept of forming this committee, and Jeannie, you said it was, and Liz, in case we get federal funds, I would think that most of the federal legislation would actually give that money directly to counties. The concept of regions isn't something that's normally defined in federal legislation. So are we, what are you talking about specifically? Much like, you know, the CARE Act that went cities over 500,000 or counties. So I'm wondering what funds you're specifically referring to that might have to be distributed at a regional level.
I'm not sure I can really speak to that. The information that I had was, again, there is a proposal to put together an interim body to do some things. I think that's different than actually standing up the agency, which is called, you know, what is it? I say it's BAFA, whatever. I don't remember what it stands for. But that is, I mean, whether or not it makes sense to do that because of potential monies. And I do not know anything about the sources of those potential money, but there is talk about there could be, don't know where, Okay,
Oh.
can't speak to it. I'm on MTC, not on ABAG.
I may be wrong on this too, but there has been some correspondence out there saying that ABAG as a quasi-municipal organization might be eligible for the direct cares money for any organization higher than 500,000 people. And that they would get a direct allocation from that. That's one thing that's out in the ether.
Okay. Okay, interesting. Any other comments from others?
No, I was just going to say that, as Jeannie mentioned, they're proposing an interim advisory committee, and it be appointed by the chairs of ABAG and MTC. I think it's 9 persons, and it's meant to be interim until, as Jeannie mentioned, BAFA is set up. That's the Bay Area Regional Housing Finance Authority that is that's set forth in state law. So that I think they would make their recommendation. They'd be appointed by the 2 chairs, and then they'd make their recommendations to the 2 bodies. Is the
Right.
way that I am reading the memo is set up.
And I have no insight into who they're proposing on that list.
Yeah, I don't either.
Jeannie, do you know the form of polling they're conducting to determine whether or not to move forward on 1487?
I think it's still the same group that's been doing this advocacy group that has been doing the polling. That's going to do another round of polling. They're trying to say you got to do it in May.
So that was also controversial, Jeannie, at the last executive.
That's what I've been told in my brief.
Go ahead, Liz.
Yeah, I was just going to say at the last executive board meeting, there was concern that it needed to be an independent group, and the problem was who was going to pay for it. It was a $3 million hit, but that the group that was for the polling was the housing group, and their recommendation was polling on a sales tax, half-cent sales tax, and there was a concern at the time that got all mixed up with the transportation measures, but there was a concern at the time that it needed to be more of an independent poll. So I don't know who's doing the poll.
Okay.
And I found the list of the proposed 9 people, just to give you a sense. It's the city of San Jose's director of housing, city of Brentwood's director of community development, county of Marin development planning manager, East Bay Community Law Center, Mid-Penn Housing, California Housing Partnership, and the San Francisco. Looks like there's a lender involved there. So it's sort of a mix, it looks like. I just found that handout.
Other comments? There's at least one person on the line or on the phone. Andy, can you help
Hi,
out?
Anita, are you, I've unmuted you, so you may talk.
Thank you.
Hi, Anita.
Hi all. I assume it's the executive board there, plus Chris and Liz and Jeannie, because I can't get on the computer. So anyway, thank you very much. I want to, just for myself, because we have not discussed this as a city council yet, to support what Liz has said, that there's too much that's trying to happen all at once. I hope that most of the organizational issues with respect to ABAG and MTC can be postponed, because those are of too much import, even the consolidation of committees, and as Chris said, deciding who would be on, what kind of expansions and so on there would be. That's too much to be dealing with in a suboptimal situation like we have now, especially when we've got Plan Bay Area. And while I agree that it's unlikely that the state would allow us to delay it, I do think it's worth asking. And even though I know it's staff's feeling that, the state's never granted anything like this in the past, we've never had this situation. I've lived here 67 years. I can't imagine any situation that has been this fast and this profound, and at this juncture has so many questions and so much, as Liz said, unknowns that we're having to deal with. So I would like to see us try to get it postponed. I think we have to ask for something more than just an email or a written presentation with respect to what's happening with the blueprint, the forecast, Plan Bay Area, I was on calls earlier in the week about Plan Bay Area and last week, and I have massive questions about the approaches that are being taken. Two things that were particularly concerning to me was when the staff were asked, well, you know, what about the current situation? The answer was, well, we can always revise things in 4 years. So I'm pleased to hear the possibility that the staff would be looking at maybe revising things in 2 years, but I still think it would be a really bad idea for this to go forward without the cities having a really good brief on the assumptions that are going into the model, and that we try as best we can to get it right now. One of my other concerns in the meetings was that there was a question, can we, the cities, get a good brief on all of the assumptions that are going into the different parts of the model? Because obviously there are several models being used to build this. And the answer was, well, when the blueprint is finalized, we'll publish the technical information, which to me was a wholly inadequate response. I think the cities need to know this is a big enough deal. We need a good understanding of the assumptions that are underlying all of the model pieces that are being used to build Plan Bay Area. There are so many holes just in the things I've looked at that, frankly, on behalf of my constituents, I'm terrified. And so I hope that as an executive board, you will give Liz and Chris leave to represent our interests and say, whoa, slow down. Let's make sure that we have all the information as much as we can. Let's make sure we get our cities briefed. Let's make sure that we can look at the criteria for the forecast and so on, all those things that have been discussed earlier. And that's all I
Okay.
have. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. Was there anyone else on the line, Andy?
No.
Okay, thank you. So close public hearing on this. Any other comments or discussion? Anyone?
Yes, Larry, I
Sorry.
just want, just for a point of clarification, what's the ask? Is the ask to empower Liz to represent what we just discussed, or Liz, are you going to draft some type of document stating the positions that we can review? Or I'm just trying to understand where
So
we
I can do that. I apologize for the suddenness of this, but everything happened literally within 24 hours of the meeting yesterday. So I was just trying to get my information together quickly. I would say that I would say that the most critical things are that the regional growth forecast is important to not move forward, even in this quote unquote, some people think preliminary fashion, because the staff reports that this regional forecast is the basis for negotiating with HCD on the RENA numbers. And that to me is really, really a critical understanding of the organization. And we want to be sure that we agree with what's in this forecast number. And yes,
So-
it can be adjusted. So that would be one ask is.
Are you a letter in such a case, or
No, just if you,
via-
I'm fine with making sure that I'm accurately representing what the group wants.
Got it.
That would be my recommendation, and that the work plan for AB 1487, I think needs to go forward, but I don't think that we will be able to vote on it without the detail of what the bond measure really is, what it really means in terms of who's going to pay for the bond and what kind of support that they are looking for from cities. And I would not be supportive of the list of people that Chris read off as being a makeup of the group. I think that would require a lot more decisions. I having done bond measures before and having worked on campaigns before, it is critical to have a detailed understanding of what people are going to be voting for if we go forward with this. That's not anywhere in sight.
Okay.
So I would
Sam, yeah.
I would slightly slightly disagree. So I agree with the second half. I agree that 1487, at least the work plan piece, should move forward. I don't think opposing the list of folks that I read off is going to work, because that's the prerogative of the presidents to propose those, and it's more of a perfunctory thing for us to approve, and they're temporary. And as we pointed out, I think once the polling comes out in 4 weeks, that's probably not going to be an issue anyway. So if I'm choosing my battles, like, that is not the battle I would want to fight. I don't think we have any choice but to move Plan Bay Area 2050 forward. These numbers aren't I disagree that these are going to be our negotiating point with HCD, because it's very clear at this point that we're going to be outside the 1.5%, and HCD is just going to give us their numbers based on their forecasts. And so what we need to do with Plan Bay Area 2050 that we're doing right now is to come up with the methodology for how we're going to allocate whatever is given us to HCD, and we can't fall behind on that. We can ask for a delay, and I would actually fully support doing that. But I don't think that we should direct staff to just stop working on that, because we're going to need to have our local methodology set up. So I just, asking for a delay is one thing, but I don't think if the state and the feds don't, and the various agencies don't give us that, then I don't think that we can just put the brakes on this. I think we have to, they're already working on modeling the data. The first sets of that will be out in 4 to 6 weeks. And it just doesn't make sense to fight that battle. I think the real battle that we should be talking about is, or the other thing in here that is, I think it's fine to combine some of these committees with ABAG MTC. I think it's just really important that we work out what the makeup of those committees are. So I don't want to be in a position where I'm told to vote to delay Bay Area, or to
Oppose.
delay Plan Bay Area 2050 when the state hasn't given us the authority to do that. That would be very awkward for me.
Right. Thanks, Chris, for that. I agree with you from a ballot measure that ballot measures are most likely dead for November. But from a Bay Area 2050 schedule and timeline, I do think that it's important that we talk about delay and talk about more meaningful output or more meaningful input from the residents before we do the output of actually putting that plan in place with this shelter in place going on. So I do think that there's some sort of let up on the timeline is important. I know Mariko has been wanting to say something. Mariko.
Actually, I had the question that Chappie had. What exactly was the ask that was that Liz and Chris were asking of us? So, what I'd love to hear, maybe I should have this clear in my mind, but from NISA, you're working on one committee. Is there any overlap whatsoever with what your committee and your group is doing with the projections that are in Plan Bay Area?
Yes, so it's to what Liz was explaining about the assumptions going into the models and analyses. That information is then sent to HCD, and they factor that in when they do our big number allocation. And we've been pushing, as Liz knows, for the last couple of months to make sure that the cities work with their planning staff to get the right information and maps into ABAG so that the models reflect accurate information. And so that's been an ongoing concern. The deadline for that was the end of May. And so to the point of, sending a letter or having Liz represent us to ask that this be further delayed, I support that. I agree with what Chris was saying, but I agree with asking to delay it only because we already had concerns about the assumptions and the data, and it's only heightened by the shelter in place. And so to the extent we can get even if it's a couple of months, I really think it would be helpful for city staff to get that additional months to get the right information and data to ABAG.
Yeah, and if I could just, my comments with that is, I just know, and it varies city by city, but our attention has been so focused on emergency response that I don't know, after our our cities association meeting, how many of my staff have been even able to look at the modeling tool that was given to us. And so more time, I know, from a city perspective would be appreciated, because once these numbers are in, it'll be far more difficult to refute and amend.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Jeannie.
So just two comments. One is I would strongly encourage you guys to look at doing the letter precisely as Nisa has said, in order to ensure the adequacy of doing the outreach and getting the meaningful input that we need that shapes some of this, that if we could look at, extending the deadlines, that we should do that. And then the other thing is, Andy, I guess I wanted to ask you, didn't we originally have Brad Paul from MTC ABAG planning to do a presentation at one of the cities association meetings, and that got deferred? Or am I thinking of something else?
No, they had asked to come, but it was not to talk about Plan Bay Area. It was to talk about the methodology, and that was supposed to be in March. And I think they already came to the Peninsula Division too. Marika, what did they come to? I don't think it was Brad though.
That was Gillian.
It was Gillian.
Yeah, so it wasn't Brad.
It was a whole group of them.
Yeah.
I would encourage that if you have more questions and such, that we look at whether or not we can get Brad in on the discussion and such, and helping him also understand, if we can move some of our internal deadlines out a little bit to do adequate outreach. I think that would be extremely beneficial.
Okay. Any final comments? I think we've given Jeannie and Chris, do you have enough information, I think, from us and to keep us up to date? I appreciate, the efforts to raise this to the board and trying to get some response, because things have been moving quickly. Any final questions?
No, just hearing you all was really helpful, and
Okay.
it sounds like especially the struggles with sort of interpreting the data from Plan Bay Area 2050 and the methodologies and everything that's going on. Just hearing that is because the cities have different abilities to do that right now, especially during shelter in place. So hearing that is helpful. And like Jeannie said, I think formally requesting a delay, even though ABAG necessarily can't provide it itself, but passing that along to ABAG staff and then trying to get the state to act on that would be super helpful. Because if the state pushes forward, we have a specific timeline we have to adhere to, unfortunately. So we'll do our best.
Okay, thank you very much, both of you. We'll now move on. Oh, Liz, anything else? No. Okay, so I know we're running way behind time, and I thank Mayor Liccardo for joining us. So we're now moving on to item 3, collaborative COVID-19 relief efforts, including Silicon Valley, and Chappie wanted to bring this in front of us. Sam is also here. Who wants to speak?
I think you're on mute, Chappie.
Yes, he is. There we go.
All right.
I'm trying to master the technique of hitting the space bar, and I'm not doing a good job. I was going to do the setup, but in the interest of time, I'm just going to hand over to Sam to speak on this issue.
Hey, thank you. And thank you all for your service on Cities Association. I know I served with many of you in past years, so good to see many of your faces again. I was hoping to speak actually about two things that are closely related here, but one is, of course, Silicon Valley Strong. And I know Larry and I have had some conversations about this, about something that initially started as a city effort, and really we recognized within hours that would be really inadequate and a very bad way to try to lead an effort to try to address the very intense needs we have in our community. And so we immediately within hours rebranded as Silicon Valley Strong. We took the website out of the city and gave it to the community foundation. And now we've got something stood up. And the good news is what has stood up, it's been something that's been really essential to help us respond to thousands of people in need. I think many of you know that the County of Santa Clara has asked the city of San Jose to take on responsibility for managing food distribution. We're now distributing about 350,000 meals a day. we critically need volunteers to do that. So with Silicon Valley Strong, we were able, I think within a matter of days, to get about 2,600 volunteers to jump in immediately, who are now delivering food to seniors and COVID positive residents. And that has been super important. And now, of course, to homeless shelters and other locations. So we would love to have your support. And by support, I mean putting it out there on social media and encouraging your cities to hustle too, to get more volunteers into the pipeline, because we're going to continue to need to ramp up that food delivery and food distribution. The reality is, I think we're all seeing, as I've been to the food lines and I'm seeing them double by the week, it's severe. We all know there's a lot of need out there and we're going to need a lot of help. The other purpose of Silicon Valley Strong, I should say, it's a website where people can go to either give or get help. So we've got obviously opportunities for folks to donate, and I'll talk about that in a moment, but also lots of information about, for example, where people can get food, where seniors can go for information, where folks can, obviously direct links to the county health information as well, because we know the county is in charge in all things health related, but lots of information and free services in particular. And so we want to encourage folks to use that brand out there, as they recognize lots of our constituents in need access to information quickly. Again, siliconvalleystrong.org. The contribution effort has been successful, though we know not nearly enough. So far, I believe about $24 million has been raised through siliconvalleystrong.org, overwhelmingly coming from major employers. Cisco stepping up hugely, well more than anybody else. So thank goodness for Chuck Robbins and his commitment, but also a lot of great employers, Adobe, Western Digital contributed more than $1 million, large contributions from Broadcom and Zoom and Micron, a whole host of other folks. We obviously need to grow that amount because the need continues to outstrip the resources. We have about 7,000 families right now on the wait list. Yes, there's no question, a large percentage of those folks are in San Jose. The last count I saw was 75% of the needy families are receiving aid are, yes, in San Jose. I think many of you know, in addition to having a population that's almost a little less than 60% of the counties, we also have a disproportionate amount of the need as well. But let me explain why I think it's important for your own cities to be involved, which is if 75% of those $24 million are going to San Jose, that does mean, of course, that 6 million are going to the rest of the cities in the Valley. And while I know there are individual efforts, and I applaud Mountain View and many others who have their own funds, and by all means, we want you to be successful, we recognize that by engaging large employers and donors to a Silicon Valley-wide, that is a county-wide fund, they are probably more likely to give than to any one of our individual cities. And in fact, what you are receiving, that is that $6 million so far, is greater than I think what any of our cities individually can go get. And so I wanted to encourage us all to be seeing how we could support this effort collectively, because I do believe it's not just in our collective best interest, but in our individual best interest as well. And be happy to take any questions, concerns you might have about that effort, siliconvalleystrong.org. Also just want to mention, since it's in the news, yesterday we launched an Economic Recovery and Resilience Council. That is one that is going to be really driven by employers. I'm not on it. I just asked several local leaders, Lisa Sues, the CEO of Advanced Micro Devices, and Chuck Robbins, CEO of Cisco, and others to head that up. We will be having a policymakers roundtable. We haven't sure what we're calling it yet, Mayor's Circle, whatever we call it. That is being co-chaired, I know, and we're still figuring this all out, but co-chaired by Larry Klein, is your chair, as I understand, as well as Chappie and the mayor of Redwood City, Diane Howard. We would love to have your participation and engagement in that separate committee, which is going to be advising this employer group. The main focus of this is trying to figure out, when we get the green light, how can we get people back to work as quickly as possible, and not just a restoration of the status quo, but how can we really focus on those who have been left out and are so critically hurting today. So we want to clearly get advice from the employers who are going to be making those decisions, and then having this public sector group advising and offering input as well. So I'm done with my pitch. Thanks for allowing me to talk, Larry. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thanks, Sam. Chappie, did you have anything to add? I know or are you just going to be here after Sam has to drop off?
Well, I will be here after Sam has to drop off. One of the reasons why it was important for Sam to come and speak to us today is I know that there were some concerns and issues around the distribution, issues around individual cities having their own fund and having this fund be in competition with that fund. And those are the kind of things that can be worked out and addressed. But I thought it was important for Sam to at least come and state the case of why it's important for all of us as a region to participate in this fund.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Chappie, you said it very well. I don't mean in any way to squeeze out what anyone else is doing. We want you all to be successful. We just think there is a common effort that can be more successful.
And Sam, I know a lot of it's donations, either food or money. You talked a little bit about volunteers. Is there a lack of volunteers, or is that okay?
Well, we continue to need more volunteers. You've probably heard from Second Harvest and others that they have lost their volunteer base, Health Trust, because people are obviously in fear, and also many of them are understandably staying home. So we want those who are willing, obviously with sufficient safeguards, that will be provided to be able to engage. And we've had, I know 2,200 folks already involved in the food distribution. We have hundreds of others working on other aspects.
Okay.
Countywide.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions?
I think Nessa is trying to talk,
Oh.
and I see that.
Margaret,
No.
I see
Okay.
you had her hand up. Go ahead, Margaret. Sorry, Nisa. Margaret.
Thank you. Thanks to everyone. Thanks, Chappie, for putting us together. Thanks, Sam, for being on the call. So, I appreciate the efforts that have been put into Silicon Valley Strong, and I definitely want to be supportive. But as you probably have heard, and you mentioned, we started our own fund, mainly because, and I know time was of the essence, and so a lot of it was put together quickly. But I talked to some of our main charity or nonprofit in Mountain View Community Services Agency about the distribution of funds. And I think that was the big question, was how would the funding be distributed amongst all the cities? And I guess what I was told was usually the funding will go to all of the EANs in the area, in the county, but this time it was consolidated all to Sacred Heart Community Services, and I know they're a great organization. I've volunteered there too, but very few people, frankly, in North County and Mountain View know Sacred Heart. So they just didn't know where to go, and they would go to their usual place, which is our own Community Services Agency, and that's why we felt the need to help our local folks, our local nonprofits. And then also on the fundraising side, frankly, I was getting folks or companies interested in donating, but donating specifically to Mountain View. And so, and then coupled with the fact that the city, we've put in now almost $1 million and $2 million of our city funds into that, it just got a little more complicated. And so unless, we can really sit down and work out how the funding would be distributed equitably, or by, population, or by donor, whatever. I think that's the hurdle I see.
Sure. Can I ask you, Margaret, how much have you raised independent of what the city's contributed, independent of that 2 million?
So 350, about $500,000, a little more,
Okay.
a little more than $500,000.
And that's wonderful. And we hope you continue to be successful. Let me just explain first about the distribution. It's through actually a constellation of 13 nonprofit organizations that are countywide. Yes, Sacred Heart is the lead, but they're not the ones who determine everything. These nonprofits are all involved under Destination Home, in the same collaborative of nonprofits that was involved in Destination Home's homeless prevention programs, which are countywide programs that include nonprofits in North County and South County, I know. And I was just trying to look them up a second ago to see if we could identify which ones specifically. They're not distributed to the cities. But certainly if you feel there's not a representative nonprofit in your region, I'm happy to respond, but I'm virtually certain that there are folks in West County and North County that
So,
are deeply engaged.
so my CEO of our community services agency, he did say that normally Destination Home will send it out to all of the EANs, but this time it went all to Sacred Heart, is what he told me. So and this was on rent relief funding. That's the main program that they're running right now. So yeah, normally Destination Home would have sent that to all of the EANs.
Let me go back to Jen Loving and find out and get you a direct answer. Maybe could I respond to that? Maybe ask the Cities Association just to deliver the answer to all you guys, because I want to make sure I get you a good answer to that question. Obviously, there's a difference of perception. I just want to make sure we get out whatever is going on, because obviously I'm not in the day-to-day. I'm just raising a few dollars.
No, definitely.
And then with regard to the fundraising, just so you know, I mean, yes, we do have some some of the companies that are in many of your cities are also contributing, like Facebook and Google, that are contributing to this fund. Overwhelmingly, by the way, the money is coming from San Jose companies. And if those companies outside San Jose said, we really want this to go to folks that are in our territory, I think there is absolutely a commitment that we know there's need everywhere, and we'd be happy to restrict in any way possible. But just to give you a sense, I think many of you talk to those companies that are in your cities often about giving large amounts of money. And my experience is, it's true in San Jose, and I'm sure it's true in smaller cities, that they really would much rather give to a region. And because their employees don't all live in your city, right? In fact, more of their employees probably live in my city than live in yours, and they recognize the value of a regional effort.
Okay. And Sam, since you're getting that data,
Yeah.
definitely the breakdown of the first 4,400, it's good to get that to the executive board, would be good as far as that's served. But
Sure.
the breakdown of, I think it's oversubscribed 5,000 plus that we're waiting, it was a numbers, and it was getting the information out. And, for the people that are waiting for that kind of second tranche, what kind of distribution and what kind of qualification would be done to try to get some sort of equity amongst the cities. So, I understand there's a need, and Sacred Heart tried to do that rent assistance as quickly as possible, but they were immediately oversubscribed. And getting, that breakdown of kind of, okay, was our first 4,400, but then what happened, how many people are still waiting, after this last donation drive from a Silicon Valley Strong, what's the breakdown of population?
Yeah.
Because definitely I heard from our Sunnyvale Community Services, and I'll echo what Margaret said, that I've been pushing Silicon Valley Strong, and I've been equally pushing, Sunnyvale Community Services, because that's where we gave our money to.
Right.
And that's if local residents want to make local need, where they're, did 1,000 families on Monday and another 700 on Wednesday, passing out bags of food for the week, and some of that is coming from Second Harvest, but some of it's local donations, everything else. I say, it's like, yes, you can give here, but you can also give locally. And that is a question, but definitely hearing from them, a lot of the people that needed rental assistance try to go to Sacred Heart, and were immediately like, didn't get in fast enough in the 3 days that it was open. And so it'd be interesting to see what the breakdown is of other people, or how many people have now just given up applying to Sacred Heart because, the first 11 million was gone. Yes, we've raised more money, but I don't know how they're servicing the waiting list, as well as the people that got the first tranche and was hoping to get more money. Anyway.
So yeah, and the reason why I was looking on my devices here as you were talking, Larry, was literally I had been texting Jen Loving to get me the breakdown, and she said she had just sent it to my email. So I was looking to hopefully have that in my inbox so I could respond intelligently to your question. It looks like it has not yet arrived.
That's fine. You don't need to answer now. I know
Yeah.
you're short of time, and I know Nisa had a question, so let's try to get everybody
Sure.
while you're still here. Go ahead, Nisa.
No, Margaret covered it because
Oh.
we're in a similar situation in Los Altos where everybody is more focused locally and what we can do to work with CSA and our local agencies that everybody is familiar with.
Okay.
But definitely will, support Silicon Valley Strong and see how we can help from a donation volunteer perspective.
Yeah, we appreciate that. And I appreciate that. Look, many families will naturally want to give in their own towns. And that's of course we expect. We're really thinking about the major employers who are being pulled across global needs and are much more interested in giving to something regional than within anyone's city limits.
Okay.
I think everybody is on the same page in terms of this is not a like either or. It's really an and.
Yeah.
For donors that want to donate regionally, they should have an option in a vehicle to do that. For donors that want to donate to a specific city or a specific community, they should have the option to do that as well. Our real task is to figure out a way to give donors options and make those options available so they can make the informed decisions. And that's where I like to work with the Cities Association to figure out how we can seamlessly do that. And Sam, I'll support your effort. And I have been supporting your effort to make that happen. So I just want to make that point.
Okay.
Larry? I do have a
Yeah,
question. I think
sure.
we can think
Go
about.
ahead.
My concern is what happens 3 months from now when things start to relax, shelter in place, and people start to feel that things are in a better place. I think we all can anticipate the financial situation for these families in need will continue.
Yeah.
So can we develop a long-term strategy that makes it sustainable once the individual contributions stop?
Marco, I think all of us are wrestling with that question, and I don't have a good answer for you. I look forward to any good ideas that you all have, but right now we're really scrambling to do everything we can do to help families in need.
Yeah. And maybe, Larry, we can talk about that as a group, how we can look at the long-term sustainability of all these contributions. So,
absolutely.
One thing I might just invite in a conversation here or elsewhere is, look, I know we've all got eviction moratorium in one form or another in our cities. We know there's a lot of back rent that's going to be due. And is there a way we could work together to encourage Apartment Association and others to really engage in sort of model workout agreements that may forgive some back rent and allow folks some more time to negotiate? Those are the kinds of things we know we're going to critically need because families aren't going to be able to pay what's due.
Right. Margaret, you had a comment or question?
Yes, sorry, question. So there's other questions that came about from our community services agency, like we have our rent relief program. Do the clients who get funding from our local CSA, can they also apply for Silicon Valley Strong? So I guess there's like those types of smaller detailed questions, like who should I tell our CEO to ask? Is like who's making the decisions, I guess?
Yeah.
How this is all working is the question.
What this conversation's really illustrated to me is that we need to get Jen Loving and her team in Sacred Heart to get information to all of you and respond to those important questions. So let me make sure we do that. I appreciate that there's a lot of, I think, frustration, understandably, that people are feeling kind of left out here. And part of that reality is just that there's a lot of people left out by virtue of the fact there's not enough resources, but I want to at least address the question you had.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you. Manny?
Yeah, thanks. Just first off, God bless you guys and your teams and everyone that's involved in Silicon Valley Strong. It's an amazing program. You guys have helped so many people and will continue to do so. And so I'm just, really appreciative from that standpoint. A lot of my comments have already been mentioned, but just wanted to let you know that, in Saratoga, we have kind of a surgical, very direct program that's designed specifically for our senior community. And it isn't just seniors, but the most frail seniors. And over the years of giving them rides to their physician's office and giving them rides to grocery and then for socialization and so forth. We've gotten to know these individuals really, really well. And so as such, it was a natural transition for us to be providing food delivery to these people. Again, from individuals that they recognize and they feel comfortable opening the door for, as well as knowing that the food is safe and, you know, and things that they like to have. Some have dietary restrictions. All those various details have been fleshed out over the years that we're now being able to relay into this food delivery program that's been really beneficial. And so, you know, we don't have a lot of financial resources to dip into, but we're doing what we can with that. And the fact that you guys are providing this program through the Silicon Valley Strong just gives us another referral that we can make to individuals in our community that aren't seniors necessarily, but can be assisted. So anyway, again, just thank you, and you know, keep up the good work, Mike, because without you guys, you know, small cities like ours, you know, just can't do much. So thank you.
Thanks, Manny. Well, thank you all for giving me a few minutes.
Sorry for the lull. I guess I brought the
Wait,
out of the room.
Larry, do you want to see if anyone wants, there still is a member of the public, Anita is still online, and I don't know if she wants to, if she has.
No, I have
public
nothing
comment.
I have nothing to add other than my appreciation to the mayor and everyone who's working on this in all the cities in every way possible.
Thank you. Well, thanks, everybody. I appreciate you giving me a little bit of airtime, and we will get back to you right away with answers to your very good questions.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Sam.
We just lost Larry.
Oh.
Did he come back?
I'm sure I'll be back in a second.
No, hey, let's make all the decisions now.
Yeah. What a motion to adjourn.
You can run it.
That'd be
Marika.
fun.
It's past my nap time.
You're in charge, Mariko.
Hmm.
Well, what's next on the agenda, Andy?
That's it. If there's public comment on things not on the agenda.
So let's go ahead and ask if there's any public comment. Larry, we just asked if there's any public comment. So
Before we go to the non-existent public comment, I just want to say that if there's any follow-up issues or questions about Silicon Valley Strong that you want to work with me, I'm here and available. So
Yeah.
take advantage
Thanks,
of it.
Chappie. Thanks. Oh,
Thank you,
by the way,
Chappie.
Chappie, just want to mention that CVS is still open, and so you can buy razors if you need to. I just wanted to mention that to you. I believe there's still a few on the shelf.
Hey, I'm gonna keep my little scruffy beard for a while. That's my shelter-in-place beard.
Oh, good. Yeah, absolutely. You can have like this celebrational ceremony at the end where you shave it. and
Exactly.
Maybe we can raise some money, you know?
There you go. That's not a bad idea.
and
All
then,
right.
and then we can donate it to Silicon Valley Strong.
There you go. That's a good idea. Now we're thinking.
So quick, Chappie, just listening to everybody and knowing how you know, Los Altos residents feel, I'm curious whether or not a lot of this has to do with PR and communication as well, so people understand Silicon Valley wide that it's for everybody, and this is how it benefits everybody, not just San Jose. So maybe that's something you can work with Jen Loving or whoever's in charge of that type of communication, because it's exactly what Margaret and Manu are saying, and even in Los Altos, where people are focused locally, they want to do things that they think will benefit or city and or residents. But if we can demonstrate why it's healthy and good for everybody to do this, then I think that will help.
No, I totally agree. Like everything else in this crisis, it happened quickly. Obviously, you know, there are things that could have been done better, that we can do better. And it's good to get this kind of feedback so we can make those course corrections.
One minor item that someone mentioned to me on the website. There are 4 cities missing when you go down to cities, including Palo Alto. And it was from someone in Palo Alto saying, gosh, maybe they don't think we're part of the county. So that might be helpful to just list all the cities.
That's not a minor thing.
I think there's like Gilroy, Palo Alto, maybe Monte Cerrito and Los Altos Hills weren't on the list. So
Okay.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, there's
feedback
only
is
11.
list every single county. I got it. That's an easy one.
You know, Nasa, you bring
That's
up a
one.
really good, Nasa, you bring up a really good point, and that is, you know, while we can do some things here locally, the large scale efforts like Silicon Valley Strong and West Valley Community Services and those various agencies can take a dollar that's donated to them and or not leverage it, but they can through their economies of scale, they can get more benefit for every dollar that's delivered. Whereas, you know, us cities with our individual efforts, you know, Mountain View and Sunnyvale excluded because they've got significant size. But the smaller cities, a dollar donated to the city is not as efficient. I'm not sure I'm saying it right, but it doesn't, you don't get the full benefit associated with it than these other programs. So I think the message, if we're, you know, the small cities going out to try to tell our residents and encourage them to donate to Silicon Valley Strong, may be one in which, again, your dollars can serve more people as a result of donating to that type of program rather than the local program. But anyway, I don't know. There's just some thoughts.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, I think the difficult thing is, you know, most of, well, at least for my city, you know, most of the people have a relationship already, either asking for need or volunteering at our local, you know, Sunnyvale Community Services. And so the concept of, okay, go, you know, volunteer or give at this county level, you know, is a nice ask, but it's like, well, why? I've been giving to, you know, SCS's, this is their 50th year in our city. And so, you know, that's a long time for those relationships to be built up and to say, well, yeah, you can give them there if you want, but to give at the county level has more bang for the buck locally. And I understand there's a regional need, but making sure that that's clear. And I think exactly what Nisa was saying, showing, you know, the breakdown or giving a better idea of how those regional dollars affected the smaller cities would be useful.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, it's an emotional thing for people when they are giving in these ways. And so if it makes them feel better to give locally to the faces and the names of people that they know and they cross paths with from time to time, is sometimes a much more fulfilling, you know, perspective. So I get it.
Yep. Okay. Anything else on this item that anyone has question about? Seeing none, we'll close this item. Unless, actually, there's one member of the public. I don't know if they want to speak in public comment or on this. Andy?
I've unmuted Anita. Anita, do you have a comment on this?
Nope.
Okay. And last is public comment. Anita, do you have general public comment?
No, thank you.
Okay. So with that, I want to thank everybody for the quick meeting, you know, for getting together on a Friday afternoon. I know how busy everyone's schedule is right now. And with that, I will adjourn the meeting at 3:22. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank you.
Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Take
Have a
care.
good weekend.
Take care.
Stay safe.
Bye now.
Bye.